tuned in and all are watching us via Facebook and are ready with their pens and jotters and ready for a lecture. As we have already explained to you in class, this is part of the academic work, and per the arrangement of the university, this predates even COVID. We always support our learners by doing a radio lecture weekly, so that things that are not clear could be made clear during the radio. We also understand that it's a community service, because we know a lot of people other than students also tune in and then benefit from the lecture that we provide. And that is why it's always exciting to come your way with a radio lecture. So you're all welcome, and thank you for tuning in to Radio WINNEBA 98.3 FM, transmitting from the University of Education South Campus. My name is Dr. Richardson ADDAI-MUNUNKUM. I am from the Department of Educational Foundations, and I am doing the lecture today. So this happens to be the very first lecture for the course EDCR111, which is captioned The School Curriculum, Social Change and National Development. I believe by now all students who are enrolled on this course have had at least one lecture. And so I'm going to do a quick recap of where we're starting, which is on the topic education. We are talking generally about education because we need to situate our discussion on the school curriculum within the broader context of education. Because without education, we can't talk of curriculum. So that is always the starting point for this course, and that is what I will want to help us to begin to think about and to get a clearer understanding of the concept of education. I believe we as students should always be ready to explain what education is, because we have been participating in education right from our primary school days up till now. So we practice education somehow, or we are beneficiaries of education. Much more so for students of University of Education, because the education is actually in our name. So it's not just a matter of something that is so distant from us. It is actually something that is part of our identity as an institution. And of course, for almost most of the program, I should say, for most of the programs in UW, it has education as a component of the program. So you have ICT education, you have history education, political science education, and so almost all our programs have education. So I've always wondered, if you were walking in town and somebody should call you and ask, okay, you are at UUW, University of Education, WINNEBA, and you are studying French education, for example. What do you mean by education? What would you say? It sounds like a very easy question, but I believe by now you're thinking about, okay, if it happened to me, what would I say? How would I explain education? A lot of students have memorized the definition. And the definition, which is very popular among a lot of students, is the one that was developed by Farrant. J.S. Farrant said, education describes the total process of human learning by which knowledge is imparted, faculties trained, and skills developed. I'll take that definition again. J.S. Farrant says, education describes the total process of human learning by which knowledge is imparted, faculties trained, and skills developed. This is a very popular definition, and I believe a lot of students who studied social studies might have used this definition at one point or the other. But what do we mean by all these things that Farrant is talking about? I want you to take particular notice of some key words in here. One of them is knowledge. One of them is faculties trained. And then skills development. So there's knowledge, there's the training of the intellect, which is represented here as faculty, and then the development of skills. According to Farrant, this is what education is all about. Interestingly, this is not the only definition of education that exists. There are so many other definitions of education. And I need to give you heads up that for a lot of social science concepts, there is no single acceptable definition. We don't have the definition of education. We have a definition of education because different people define it differently. And depending on the context that you're using a particular concept, and in this case education, you might subscribe to one definition or the other. So don't ever make the mistake that one definition, like what I just read to you, is the single accepted definition. There's nothing like that. There are so many definitions. But what I just read to you from Farrant contain keywords that I want you to pay attention to. There's the development of knowledge, there's the training of faculties, which is the training of the intellect, and then the development of skills. Now I want us to take a step back and look at the term education and ask ourselves, where is it coming from? So there's a terminology that is called etymology. E-T-Y-M-O-L-O-G-Y. Etymology. When we say etymology, we are asking about the roots, the source of a concept or a terminology. For the sake of this concept called education, we want to look at the roots of the word education. Where is the word education coming from? Generally, there are two schools of thought on the possible source of the term education. A scholar by name Schofield in 1973 said that education as a concept has its roots in a Latin word. And the Latin word is educere. E-D-U-C-E-R-E. E-D-U-C-E-R-E. I don't know if I'm pronouncing it right, but that is how it sounds like if we were to get the closest approximation in English. That would be educere. The meaning of this Latin word means to lead out. To lead out. So Schofield says, I think education comes from this Latin word educere, because educere in Latin means to lead out. And we know education has something to do with somebody leading out on something. For a lot of instances, education happens when somebody who is the knower tries to transmit some form of knowledge, skill, or attitude to the person who does not know. And so in that sense, the person who knows is leading out to support somebody to learn. And we know that is what teachers are best known for. We all prepare ourselves to go to the classroom and lead our students into understanding concepts, values, and acquiring some skills. And so Schofield, based on this understanding, said, yes, then this is the Latin word from which we got the word education. So educere and education seem to have that connection. And for that reason, we say it is one of the possible etymologies of the concept of education. Another scholar by name Kraft in 1984 said that education is from a Latin word, but he suspected that it is from a Latin word spelled EDUCARE, which means educare. It sounds, or we can read it in English as educare. I don't know whether the Latin form is pronounced exactly like that. But Kraft saw this word in Latin, which I'm approximately pronouncing as educare. And the meaning of educare in Latin is to form or to train. To form or to train. So Kraft believed, oh, then this is the source of education. And we can't disagree with Kraft, because education generally involves the formation of the human body, the formation of the human being into somebody that we want to see. So throughout education, what we do is to develop the heart, the mind, and the hands, so that you can become the adult that we want to see you become. And so if education is involved in the formation of a human person, and educare in Latin means to form or to train, then we could suspect that the word education is coming from the Latin word educare. So that is Kraft's argument, that the etymology of the concept of education is educare in Latin. So who do we believe? I say we believe all of them, because the two Latin words, as we're talking about, all seem to have explanation related to education. And so we can't discount them. We just have to accept that any of them could have been, or a combination of both of them could have been the source of the concept education. So we want to take it together that education involves somebody leading out in a process that helps in forming or training an individual. If I should put the two meanings together, that is what I get. That education is about somebody leading out in order to form or to train an individual. And from this possible roots, there are a number of definitions that have been proposed. And as I told you earlier, there are so many definitions of education. It's not only one. And so I gave you one, which was the most popular, by Farrant, which says education describes the process of human learning by which knowledge is imparted, faculties trained, and skills developed. I want to give you another definition. A scholar by name Agarwal. Agarwal is spelled Aggarwal. Agarwal in 1995 said that education is what each generation purposefully passes on to those who are to be their successors in order to prepare them to deal with another and their surroundings purposively. I'll take it once more. Agarwal says education is what each generation purposefully passes on to those who are to be their successors in order to prepare them to deal with another and their surroundings purposively. So what Agarwal is arguing here is that when we talk about education, we are talking about the transmission of knowledge, skills, attitudes, and values from one generation to another. So the grandparents will transmit these knowledge, values, and attitudes to the parents. The parents will transmit to their children. The children will grow to become parents and also transmit to their children, and then the tradition goes on. So according to Agarwal, this is what education is about. It's about generation passing on valuable things within the society to the successors, so that they are able to survive and make life better for themselves. I think we can agree with Agarwal that it is true. Even if we are to take the university for example, some of us teaching in the university at some point were students like you. At that time, there were lecturers who were teaching us who had also been taught by lecturers who were dead and gone by the time we got there. Now we get a chance to teach you, but in the near future we'll be the old people phasing out, and some of you students will be in our place. And because we have been able to pass on knowledge, skills, and attitudes to you, you will also be in a better position to transmit that to the younger generation who are yet to be born, who will be coming to the university in 20 years to come. And so education is some form of transmission from one generation to the other. And that is the import of Agarwal's definition. You remember Farrand said, education is the process of human learning by which knowledge is imparted, faculties trained, and skills developed. So Farrand was talking about knowledge, skills, and the development of intellect. Agarwal is talking about the passing on of these values from one generation to another generation. Another scholar by name Castle, just like castles that we have here, that is somebody's name. Castle in 1965 said that education is what happens to a human person from the day they are born to the day they die. This is also another interesting definition of education. So note it, this is the third one. I've already given you that of Farrand, which is about transmission of knowledge, skills, and values. I've given you that of Agarwal, which is talking about transmission from one generation to the other. Castle seems to have expanded our thinking of education when he argues that education is what happens to a human person from the day they are born to the day they die. That is kind of interesting, because it sounds like it is true. Day in and out, we are educated because new experiences come up from which we learn new things. Since the advent of Corona, we have all learned to put on face masks. Before then, it was only used by the health professionals. And so the very first time we started using face masks, it was a bit uncomfortable. And some of us were complaining. But with time, we have managed to learn how to use face masks in doing a lot of things. And so even as I speak to you, my mask is on. So there is some form of education going on with me, even with the emergence of COVID. When the university started using LMS, a lot of us had never learned online before. When COVID happened, we were forced to learn it. And so at every point in time, there seemed to be some opportunities coming up for education to happen. And that is why Castle says, education is what happens to you from the day you're born to the day you die. So the day you're born, the very first thing you learn to do is to cry. And later you begin to use crying as a tool to get what you want, before you develop language and all the other things. And you will continue to be educated until the day you give off your last breath. Because until you die, you are going to get new experiences and you are going to learn or be educated by these experiences. So Castle's argument appears quite logical. But the question that we will want to ask is it everything that happens to the human person that is education? That is quite debatable, because there are things that happen to us that we don't really get any form of education from, especially things relating to routine things that we do. If we learn to put on our face mask, that is one form of education we've had. But subsequently, when we are putting on the face mask, it ceases to be education. It's no longer education. So me putting on face masks every day might not necessarily be education to me. And so with time, routine things do not become education any longer because we already know them. Of course, we do learn new things and add to what we already know. So it's quite debatable if we want to go strictly by Castle's definition and say everything that happens to us is education. And so another scholar by name R.S. Peters suggested, okay, let's begin to distinguish between what will count as education and what will not count as education. So R.S. Peters proposed that for something to count as education, it must fulfill a 3-point criteria. There's a 3-point criteria that we can subject activities to and determine whether we can count them as education or we cannot count them as education. So I'm going to talk to you about these criteria. Listeners, if you have just joined us, this is radio lecture and it is for the course EDCR111, School Curriculum, Social Change and National Development. I am Dr. ADDAI-MUNUNKUM doing the presentation this evening. And so far we have tried to understand the roots of the term education and suggested that 2 schools of thought has suggested, one, that it could be from the Latin word educere, and another has suggested that it could be from the Latin word educare. We have agreed that both of these concepts or these sources or etymology carry the meaning of education. So we feel compelled to accept that these are the source of the term education. We have tried to look at some definitions of education. First, I talked about the definition of Farrant, which talked about the transmission of knowledge, values, and development of the intellect. Then I talked about the definition of Agawa, which talks about transmission of values, knowledge, and attitude from one generation to the other. And I just talked about the definition of Castle, who says that education is what happens to the human person from the day they are born to the day they die. Now, it is this argument about whether everything that happens to us is education that has necessitated us looking at the criteria for determining something as education. So we are talking about R.S. Peters, who proposed that there's a 3-point criteria that activities should satisfy in order for them to be classified as education. So we are looking at this criteria. Criterion number 1. R.S. Peters says what counts as education should transmit what is worthwhile to those who become committed to it. What counts as education should transmit what is worthwhile to those who become committed to it. In effect, the emphasis here is on the transmission of worthwhile activities, practices, skills, knowledge, values, and attitudes. For something to count as education, there should be this transmission of these things that are worthwhile. So if there's a transmission of things that are not worthwhile, we cannot count as education. So that is the first criterion. Education should transmit what is worthwhile. Criterion number 2 says that education must involve knowledge and understanding and some sort of cognitive perspective which is not inert. The point Peters is making here is that whatever should count as education should involve some element of knowledge and understanding. So, making people memorize without understanding will not count as education because they don't understand what they are talking about. So memorization, rote learning is not in the strictest sense education, because education must involve knowledge and understanding. So criterion number 1 says you should transmit what is worthwhile. Number 2 says there should be knowledge and understanding. And number 3 says there should be voluntariness and or willingness on the part of the learner. For an activity to count as education, the learner subjecting themselves to be educated should do so on their own accord. The learner should not be compelled to be educated. There is the saying that you can force the horse to the riverside, but you cannot force it to drink. It holds true for education as well. If you are thinking the activity you are engaged in is education, then the learners that you are using or the learners that are benefiting from the education should have voluntarily submitted themselves to learn. Other than that, we can count it as education. So let us test what we are doing at the University of Education, WINNEBA, by this 3-point criteria. Peter says education must involve the transmission of things that are worthwhile. And so we should ask ourselves, what we do at UUW, does it involve the transmission of things that are of value? And my answer is yes. We are transmitting knowledge, we are transmitting skills, we are transmitting attitudes that are very valuable to us as individuals and to the society at large. And so we first satisfy the number 1 criterion. Number 2 criterion says it must involve knowledge and understanding. Do we do that here? And I'll say yes. This is the foremost teacher education institution. And so a lot of the people who teach here, who we call lecturers, actually don't lecture. We teach. Because we believe teachers teach the way they are taught. And so if we start lecturing to you, you also go and begin to lecture. So you observe that a lot of the lecturers here actually do teaching and not lecturing, because we want you to understand. We don't just want to bang the knowledge into your mind. We actually want you to understand and appreciate, so that you can begin to internalize them and then practice them. And so what we do here involves knowledge and, more importantly, involves understanding. And so that satisfies the second criterion as well. So at UUW, we transmit what is worthwhile, and in doing that, we transmit knowledge, but we make sure our students are understanding them. And so we satisfy the second criterion too. Then the third criteria is that the learners should voluntarily submit themselves. I believe none of you students here was forced to be here. You willingly purchased the voucher, applied online, got admitted, you received your letter, and you voluntarily went to pay your fees, packed your bag and baggage, and came because you think there is something of value that we are transmitting here that you want to benefit from. And so nobody was compelled here, and so we satisfy the third criterion as well. So yes, what we are doing here at UW then is education, because it satisfies all the 3 criteria that R.S. Peters suggested. So on your own, begin to think of other things in the social environment that might have been thought of as education, and begin to evaluate them by these 3-point criteria. Are they transmitting what is worthwhile? Does it involve knowledge and understanding? Do people or learners voluntarily submit themselves to be taught? If that activity you're observing satisfies these 3 criteria, then R.S. Peter says yes, then it's education. I think you can begin to look around and on your own begin to assess some of these. And be sure to bring it up when you meet your lecturers in lecture halls, and then suggest them as possible examples of things that we can consider as education, or things that might have been thought of as education but as not education if we are to assess them by the criteria that we have just talked about. Listeners, this is EDC111 radio lecture. If you have just joined us, it's me, Dr. ADDAI-MUNUNKUM, doing the presentation. Towards the end of the presentation, we're going to open the phone lines and then invite you to come in with your questions and contributions that will help us better understand what we are talking about. And so you take your pens and paper and begin to write the numbers, so that when it is time, we can open up the phone lines, the text lines, the WhatsApp message lines, and then we can receive your contributions and questions. So the lines to use are as follows. If you want to call the studio line at 050 392 3158. 050 392 3158. Or you can also call 0332 32 0201. I take it again. 0332 32 0201. When you are calling, please reduce the volume on your radio set or move away from it so that we don't get the unpleasant feedback. If you want to send us an SMS, you can also do so with this number, and it applies to WhatsApp as well. 050 392 3158. It was the first number I gave. 050 392 3158. That number takes both text messages and then WhatsApp. So be preparing your questions and contributions and submit them so that we can address them. I'm going to move on to talk about the types of education. From experience, a lot of students are very familiar with formal education and informal education, and we can clearly distinguish between the two. Formal education is what we are experiencing now at the university, where there's a hierarchy, there's a structure, and education exists within this structure. We can talk of formal education as what you experienced in primary school, what you experienced in JHS, what you experienced in SHS, and what you're experiencing now at the university. It is a system that is well structured, that is planned according to time and events. It has professionals doing what they know how to do best in order to transmit education as we want it to happen. When you have a system like this, we call it a formal education. That is one type of education. And we can quickly contrast this to informal education, which is more like a lifelong process where every individual acquires attitude, knowledge, and skills from daily experiences and through the influences of people and the environment around us. So in our homes, we learn language. We are not directly taught, but as we observe, imitate, and participate, we are able to learn how to cook, for example, because we were close to our mother at the kitchen. We learn our language, and we learn the skills in language arts, reciting poem and all of that. We learn how to sing, mostly through the informal form of education. Informal education is not structured because there's no distinction between who is a teacher and who is a learner. Both adults and students, when we are in the informal environment, teach or learn from each other. And so the structure is very loose in informal type of education. But with formal education, the structure is quite rigid. Perhaps what gets confusing is where we talk about the third type of education referred to as the non-formal education. By non-formal education, we mean an organized, systematic educational activity that is carried outside the framework of formal system, so that selected types of learning are delivered to particular subgroups of the population who may be adults or children. What I'm trying to say here is that with non-formal education, a group of people who see the need for some learning come together and then seek help from somebody who offers them some form of education to satisfy that need. Such non-formal education might not run for a very long time. It is just put together for a particular need, and once that need is solved, that form of education ends. And I'll give you an example of that. A lot of us learned how to drive by going to a driving school. In a driving school, you meet other people like you who want to know how to drive. And so you meet there. The driving school will organize lessons for you. Some of them might be theoretical, and most likely you begin by learning road signs. After learning these things, then they take you to the road and then teach you how to drive. So you acquire the skills of driving. Once you have learned how to drive, the contract with the driving school ceases. So we can say attending a driving school is an example of a non-formal education. In my other class, somebody mentioned these kind of informal trainings. Periodically, you have NGOs organizing some women and teaching them how to make soap, how to make tie and dye. All those forms of groupings and training that are offered can be classified under non-formal education, because it is a program that has been designed for a particular group of people who have a particular need for a particular skill, knowledge, or value, and for which they seek help from people who can provide it, and then the people make opportunities available for them to learn those skills, knowledge, and attitudes. So non-formal education could be delivered to adults and children alike, but it's more predominant with adults because children already benefit from formal education and are usually not participants of non-formal education. That doesn't mean it cannot happen. Because of late, there are groups that are organizing special Chinese classes, and that may involve children who want to learn how to speak Chinese. And so they will go for their weekend classes just to learn Chinese. That is a form of non-formal education. Such education cannot be said to be formal because it is structured. Although it is structured, it is not as rigid as that of formal education. In formal education, there's promotion exam. If you don't pass, you don't get promoted, and all those rigid rules. If you are late, you're punished, and all of that. All these rigid rules do not apply in non-formal education. So in spite of the fact that it has a structure, it is not very rigid as we have in the formal education. It is also not informal education because informal education does not have a structure at all. Non-formal education at least has a structure. And for that reason, we cannot say it is informal, and we cannot also say it is formal. And that is why we say it is non-formal. It is between informal and then formal. So that is the third type of education. There's the informal that happens within the social environment of society. There is a formal that happens in institutions that are particularly designated for education, like our primary schools, our JHS, our SHS, and the universities. Then there is non-formal education that is organized for a particular group of people who need help. And one classic example we can give again to explain non-formal education is the Adult Literacy Program of the Non-Formal Education Division of the Ministry of Education. It used to be very vibrant. Of late, I don't hear much of it, but I think it is still there. In communities where literacy level is very low, they organize classes, mostly at night, to teach adults how to read and write. That is an example of non-formal education. So we can make some distinction between the types of education by certain features that are associated with them, and we are going to be looking at them. As we do that, I think this will be a good time to open the phone lines and invite questions and contributions to support the radio lecture. The numbers to call, as I indicated earlier, are 050-392-3158, or you can also call 0332-320201. When you are calling, please reduce the volume on your radio set or move away from your radio set when you call, because it gives us a terrible feedback and we might not even hear what you're saying. The first number also takes text messages and WhatsApp. So if you want to WhatsApp us your message or text, use the number 050-392-3158. We'll be ready to take your submissions as they come. Okay, I hear there's a caller already on the line, so I'm going to take the caller. Hello, caller.
Hello.
Hi. Your name and your department, please.
My name is Paul. I'm calling from the ICT department.
Okay, Paul from ICT department. Yes. Do you have a question or contribution for us?
Yes. The question I would like to ask is that looking at the definition from Castle, Agawa, and Farah, can we say that marriage is also a form of education?
Interesting. Marriage, is it a form of education? Thank you very much, Paul. I will take your question and answer. I think somebody else is on the line. I'll take that one and then respond. Is there a caller on the line? No. Okay. Good. So Paul is asking whether we can say marriage is education. Maybe I should ask Paul, which type of education would you consider this? Marriage is an institution which you might need some form of education to participate in. That one I can agree. Is there a caller on the line? Okay, yes. Hello, caller.
Yeah, please, good evening.
Good evening.
Yeah.
What is your name and your department, please?
We can call Sakina, and my department is social studies.
Okay, Sakina, social studies. Okay,
yeah.
Sure.
We can explain the informal education again, because that one I was not around.
Okay, the informal education, Sakina.
Yeah.
Okay, good. I will do that. I will do a quick recap for you.
Okay, sir.
Thank you very much. Yes, is there another one on the line? Hello, caller.
Hello.
Yes, please reduce the volume on your radio set. It's giving us terrible feedback. Yes, okay. Please go ahead. What's your name and your department, please? Okay, he's gone. Okay. Yeah, you're still there. Okay, speak up. Your name and your department, please.
This is Richard.
Richard, okay, from which department?
From Guidance Department.
Okay, Counseling Psychology Department. Okay, do you have a question or contribution?
Richard, may I know whether workshop organized for staff or professionals
Okay.
fall under informal or informal education or formal?
Okay, good. That's a very good question. Thank you very much. Yes, Richard,
Right.
I will take your answer. I will give you an answer after I've taken a couple of submissions. Somebody else. Good. There's another caller on the line. I'm going to take. Hello, caller.
Hello, good evening.
Good evening. Your name and your department?
My name is Lukaya Musa, and I'm calling from the Applied Linguistics and English Language.
Okay, Lukaya from Applied Linguistics. Do you have a question or contribution for us?
And please, I think it's a contribution.
Okay, we can take it now. Let's go.
Please, based on what you just taught us, I think if education is something that you can learn informally or formally and non-formally.
Lukaya, are you still there? Oh, I'm sorry we lost you on the line. Can you call back and give your contribution, because we're very interested? Thank you very much, Lukaya. Okay, I think there's no caller, so I'm going to take the questions. Okay, there's another caller. Hello, caller.
Yeah, good evening.
Good evening. Your name and your department?
This is Joseph at the department.
Okay, Joseph from our department.
Yeah.
Do you have a question or contribution for us?
Yeah, it's a question.
Okay.
I want to ask, those who learn a trade, are they formal or informal?
Informal,
as
good.
They learn the trade, they also impart, or some also go and teach people. So I want to know more about those who are traders.
Thank you very much. That's a very good question. Good. I will give you an answer shortly, so stay tuned. Thank you very much, Joseph. Good. Yes, another caller on the line. Hello.
Hello, good evening, sir.
Good evening. Your name and your department?
Asante Matthew, ICT department.
Okay, Matthew from ICT. Do you have a question or contribution for us?
No, mine is just to thank you very much for your lecture.
Okay.
It is very understandable, and we thank you for that, sir.
Thank you very much for that feedback, Matthew. We're very happy to hear that. Good. Thank you. And another caller on the line. Hello, caller. Hello, caller. Hello, caller. I think you're still there. Please speak up.
Hello.
Hi.
I'm Sule Mohamed, and I'm calling from the Arts Education Department.
Okay, Sule.
Okay, my question is that according to R.S. Peters, 1966, provides us with a very useful way of determining how or what counts as education.
Sure.
And then I want to ask, amongst all that three
criteria,
very useful ways of determining what counts as education, sending a small child to kindergarten can be also counted as education.
Okay.
And that's my question.
Thank you very much. Kindergarten, is it education? That's a very interesting question. Good. Yes. It's another caller on the line. Hello, caller.
Hello, sir. Please, after problem.
Sorry, please stay away from your radio. It's giving us terrible feedback.
Okay.
Okay, good. It's better.
I tried to log into the account, that's the educational curriculum of the Green class, but it seems they said I can't use.
Okay, yes. I think you have a problem. You can talk to your lecturer later about V class, but we are doing a radio lecture now, so we want to respond to questions related to the lecture. Thank you very much. Okay, so one more and then we can take responses. Hello, caller.
Hello, good evening.
Good evening. Your name and your department?
It's Rachel Musa from Applied Linguistics.
Oh, look at her. Okay, good. I'm happy you're back. You wanted to give us a contribution. Yes, please go ahead.
I'm saying that based on what you just said, it means that we can in one way or the other learn by observation, right? And also, we know that when they say that you are educated, then probably it is because you've learned something and you have experimented it. So for that matter, can you say that education is the process of acquiring knowledge through observation and experimentation?
Yes, I will say that. That's also a definition of education. So thank you very much for bringing that up. We're happy about that contribution, Lukaya, and keep listening. Thank you very much. So yes, at this point, I think I'll begin to respond to the questions before we take other submissions. So Paul wanted to know whether marriage is education. Marriage is an institution. that relies on some form of education to make it work. And so people who are going into marriage learn things associated with marriage so that they are successful. So the institution itself might not be education as we want to explain it to be, but you need education to survive in this institution called marriage. Sakina was not very clear about informal education. And so Sakina, informal education is what the form of education we experience in our social environment, the ones that don't happen in the school environment. So staying in your home and learning to do things that your community members do is a form of informal education. You perform cultural practices because you learned it from your mothers, from your grandmothers, from your peers in your community. All those things are what we consider as informal education. So Sakina, I hope it's clearer. What you do in school is formal, but what you do at home generally is informal education. Richard wanted to know whether workshops organized will count as education and where would we place them. Yes. So to the extent that the workshop is transmitting something worthwhile, it involves knowledge and understanding and it involves voluntariness, then R.S. Peters' criteria says it is education. So if it's education, where would we place it? With workshop, we will say it is non-formal. It is non-formal because it is structured, but just as rigid as the formal education will make it be. And so workshop will count as an example of non-formal education. Joseph wanted to know whether learning a trade is also a type. What type of education will this fall under? Learning a trade is not very structured. A lot of times the learning happens informally, as the people who are learning to trade will just observe, imitate their masters or superiors, and then participate as they go along. So to that extent, we will say learning a trade is informal. It's an informal form of education. Then Sule wanted to know whether kindergarten can be classified as education. That is a very interesting question, and I know why you're asking that question. Because Peter's criteria says education should involve voluntariness on the part of the learner, and it should involve some form of understanding. And I know you're thinking that children in kindergarten might not have willingly submitted themselves to be educated. And so to that extent, it might not strictly satisfy the criteria of education. But we know that of late we have begun to formalize kindergarten. Back in the days it wasn't. Kindergarten, by the way, means little garden. And so initially the idea was to get children around to play and socialize and then have some form of development, not under strict rigid conditions. But of late, because a lot of children go to crèche before they come to kindergarten, by the time they go to kindergarten, they're already prepared. They know what school is. They love and want to go to school. And so that argument of voluntariness might work for them because they want to go to school. And in some respect, depending on what is learned there, some of them involve understanding. So with what we have presently, and with kindergarten accepted as part of a formal school system, we will say kindergarten is a form of education. But your concern about voluntariness and understanding is also very important. And so maybe we can assess by individual kindergartens. If you go to the kindergarten and it feels like the children are not willing and there's no understanding, then we have a suspicion that it might not be doing education as we know it to be. So thank you very much for bringing that question up. Good. So we can begin to take a next round of questions. And so you can call in, listeners. I think we took a break because we wanted to respond to all these questions. So you can come in with your questions. The number to call is 050-392-3158 or 0332-320201. You can also send text or WhatsApp on the first number, and we can take your submissions and respond to them. Is there a caller on the line? Yes. Hello, caller.
Sir, good evening.
Good evening. Your name and your department.
Sir, Martin, ICT department.
Okay, Martin from ICT. Do you have a question or contribution for us?
Sir, please, interest and tailoring, does it form under non-formal education?
Can you say that again? I didn't get the first part.
Please, interest and tailoring.
Seamstress and tailoring. Oh, okay. So trades. Okay, seamstress and tailoring. Is it part of what type of education? Okay, good.
Yes.
I will respond to your question shortly.
Yes.
Good. Thank you very much, Martin, for coming in. Is there another caller on the line?
Yeah, hello.
Hello.
Sir,
Hello, caller.
Hello. Good evening, sir.
Good evening. Your name and your department.
My name is February Samuel. I'm calling from. My department is Garden Psychology Department.
Okay, counseling psychology, Samuel. Yes. Do you have a question or contribution for us?
I have a question, actually.
Okay. Yes. Let's go with the question.
My question is: someone says that non-formal education is education of formal and informal education.
Can you say that again? I missed a couple of words.
I said my question is: can one say that the non-formal education is a combination of formal and informal?
Okay, is it a combination of formal and informal? Okay, thank you very much. I will respond to that shortly.
Hello.
Yes.
Good evening, sir.
Good evening. Your name and your department.
I'm Ebenezer from ICT.
Okay, Ofori, ICT. Do you have a question or contribution for us?
I have a question.
Okay.
I have two questions actually.
Sure.
The first question is short courses. Like now they've been organizing short courses that involve certificate.
Sure.
With that one, is it a formal or non-formal education?
Thank you very much.
Then the second one is vocational institutions.
Okay.
Are they formal or non-formal education?
Okay.
So that is my question.
Thank you very much. I will respond to your question. So keep listening. Thank you very much, Ofori. Is there another person on the line? Okay, not yet. So, okay, there's one. Hello. Your name and your department?
Good evening, sir.
Good evening. Your name?
I am Eric from Department of Art Education.
Okay, Eric from Art Education. Good. Do you have a question or contribution?
My question is, RSP tests give a criteria on which something to satisfy before qualified to be an education.
Yes.
For instance, if it satisfies two of the criteria and couldn't satisfy one, is it qualified to be described as education?
Okay, that's a very good question. 2/3. Does it still qualify? Thank you very much. I will respond to that shortly. Okay. Hello, caller.
Yes.
Good. Your name and your department. Hello.
Hello.
Yes.
Hello, sir.
Yes, your name and your department.
Please, I'm Peter. I'm from the ICT department.
Okay, Peter from ICT department. Do you have a question or contribution for us?
Sir, please, a question.
Sure.
But first of all, I must commend you for the tremendous work you are doing. It's very explanatory.
Thank you very much for commending the team.
The question.
Sure.
In analyzing Castle's definition, you said that Castle says education is what happens to a person from the day you were born to the day we die.
Yes.
And in analyzing it, you use wearing of nose masks as an example that we learned to wear nose masks at a certain point in time when we were encountered with a certain situation.
Yeah.
And so you went on to say that now you have used the nose mask to a certain point and you think it is no more education again. So my question is, if you acquire a knowledge through education and then at a certain point you use the knowledge and become more experienced with it, does it cease to become an education with you? Let's take it for instance, I'm an IT student. I learn how to program a computer. And at a certain point, I have used it, I have programmed a lot of computer and I have become well experienced in programming computers.
Yeah.
Does it seem to be an education with me? So
okay.
That is my question.
I get your point.
Thank
I
you
know
very
where the
much.
confusion is. Thank you very much, Peter. I will respond to that shortly. So, okay. Hello? Your name and your department.
My name is Tekeva Zafin from ICT department.
I didn't get the name right. What is it?
It's a Clever.
Clever. Okay.
Yes.
Clever from ICT department. Okay. Good.
My question is, every Friday the Muslim children go to the mosque to learn about the Quran.
Okay.
So my question is that one where, like, which form of education is that?
Is that okay? The madrasa. That's interesting. Popularly called makaranta. Okay. Thank you very much, Clever, for your question. We will answer shortly.
Okay,
good. Is another caller on the line? Hello, caller. Hello, caller. Uh-oh. Hello. Speak up, please. You are online.
Good evening, sir.
Good evening. Your name and your department?
I'm Ishmael.
Ishmael.
I'm from the ICT department.
Oh, good. ICT, you're doing very well. Yes. Do you have a question or contribution for us?
Oh, I have a question, but first and foremost, I would like to thank you for the marvelous work that you are doing.
Thank you very much for thanking us.
Sir, please, I want to ask that those who don't hear, but they use the sign language to teach them, what form of education does that for those who use the sign language?
Sign language.
Yes, sir.
Okay, good. So if sign language is used, what form of education is that? Okay, thank you very much, Ishmael, for your question. Good. I think we're going to take a break and then... Okay, there's one more. We'll take that one and then we'll take a break to respond. Hello, caller.
Hello, sir. Good evening.
Good evening. Your name and your department?
I'm Samuel, Economics Department.
Okay, Samuel from Economics Department. Yes, do you have a question or contribution?
Yes, please, let's take it as that in my church, the activities have been programmed and have become a routine.
Okay.
So can we classify that one as formal or informal?
Informal. Okay, church activities.
My next question is, if I am a teacher and I use the curriculum or the structured one to teach my children at the house, but the child hasn't been to the school before.
Okay.
So can I classify that one as a formal
education? Okay. Teacher teaching in the house. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Samuel. Excellent. Thank you very much, all those who called. You are bringing very important questions that will help us to better understand what we are talking about. I will take the questions that came. Martin from ICT was asking whether those who learn tailoring and dressmaking, what type of education are they involved in? So tailoring and dressmaking has there are different dimensions of it. So I want to be very careful to get enough information about the type you're talking about before we are able to judge whether it is informal or it is formal. There is a type where people actually form schools, like the ADDAI collections and all of that, where they organize and then train them as a formal school. If that is a formalized structure where there's a curriculum, where there's a plan of action, then that becomes a formal institution. So it becomes formal education. But we also know that there are others who also learn by just observing, imitating, and participating. So there are some laborers who will follow artisans first as laborers. They will not probably join the masonry to learn, but they are just laborers going with them, and then with time they acquire the skill of doing masonry. If it becomes that is the practice, then that becomes informal education. So for your question, we'll need more information about the seamstress and the tailoring practices to be able to determine whether it is informal or non-formal. Samuel wanted to ask whether non-formal is a form of informal. Okay, I took some notes. I'm trying to make sense of it. The question was about non-formal education and whether it can be said to be between formal and informal, and the answer is yes. Non-formal education stands in between the formal and informal because it borrows features from formal education and borrows some features from informal. The distinction between non-formal and formal is that non-formal is loosely structured. It is not strictly structured as we have in the formal education, and that is the distinction between non-formal and formal education. Ofori wanted to know whether short courses can be classified as education and what type of education will that fall under. Short courses are usually organized either by universities or by a specific institution for the purpose of awarding certificates. So it goes with strict deadlines. You're supposed to register, you're supposed to take your classes, you're supposed to pass exam and pass. If all these features are present, then it becomes formal education. It doesn't matter that it is short period. It is still formal education because it goes with those rigid structures of formal education. Then you also ask whether those who attend vocational school, what type of education is that? Vocational school is also a type of formal education. The emphasis there is more on skill development than on the abstract concepts being learned, and so it's still formal education. Eric wanted to know if we satisfy 2 of the criteria and then there's one that is not satisfied, will this still count as education? The answer is no, it won't count. According to RSP test, we need to see all the 3 present for it to count as education. Peter was asking whether if you acquire some form of education and then you continue to use them, then we say education has ended. I need to clarify, Peter, with my example about the nose mask, I was giving the instance of you not learning any new thing about the nose mask. For example, when it started, the type of nose mask people were making has improved with time. So it tells you people are learning new things with the nose mask. Even for us users, the way we were tying it around our heads has changed. We keep learning new things. But if it gets to a point, my argument is if it gets to a point where nothing new is being learned, then we can't say just wearing the nose mask is making you learn a new thing. And that is the argument I was making, that it gets to a point, it becomes so routine, nothing new is coming up. And if nothing new is coming up, then we wouldn't want to say that practice in life is education per se. Clever had a very clever question asking whether our children who participate in madrasa, that is rote learning of the Quran, will count as education. If we are going by RSP test criteria, there is the knowledge and understanding. There is the perception that the students go there and just memorize without understanding. If this perception is true, then we wouldn't count that as education. But I haven't done much to be able to say on authority that they do not understand what they are doing. And so if they understand what they are doing, then it perfectly makes sense to say it is education. But if it's just rote learning and it doesn't involve understanding, then that wouldn't be education. Ishmael asked about sign language. Using sign language to teach, is that education? Yes, sign language is also a language, so it is just like using English to teach, so that forms part of education. Samuel wanted to know whether church activities that are structured will form part of a formal education. I don't know how structured this kind of church activity is, but to the extent that there are no failures, there are no examinations, and people don't get driven out when they don't comply, I shudder to think that it will be formal education. We can either consider it for non-formal education or informal education. And then you ask if a teacher teaches the children with the school curriculum at home, will that count as formal education? So the formality of formal education is not about the person teaching it and the curriculum. It is about the structure that is organized for that kind of education. So if the teacher forms his own school in the house, which is very well structured with timetable, which is strictly enforced and all of that, then we'll say it's formal education. But you and I know in a lot of instances when teachers are teaching their children, they don't crack the whip as they would do in the school. They are more liberal in the house because they are their children. And in that sense, it might not count as formal education. Listeners and watchers, viewers, I should say, I will be taking submissions on Facebook. Yes, we had a couple of us sending comments on Facebook and WhatsApp messages. So let me take them. French department, the name is not very clear. And the question is, okay, so the name is Larry Martina. Please, I want to ask that you do not think education has negative impact on us. Why? Okay, Martina, you're asking whether education does not have negative impact on us. I will want to further explanation about the negative impact that you're talking about. But offhand, I can see why you are asking this, because some people get educated and then they lose out some cultural values, and so depending on how the education is structured, it could have some negative effects on the individuals. If it's not very well structured, it could affect us negatively. Good evening, sir. Edem Mensah is my name. Art department. Good. Please, if trading is not structured, then why is it that certificate is given to the apprentice after graduation? Thank you very much. That is a very good question. Yes, they get certificates after graduation. There is some form of structure to it. I think I didn't say that trading. Okay, so let me be clear. What you have experienced and what I might have experienced might not be the same, and so if I'm trying to communicate something that is not exactly what you have experienced, you have every right to challenge me on that one. So what I understood by learning how to trade is that people just join master tradesmen and then observe, imitate, and participate in their activities, and then they learn. If that is what you have also observed, then that will be informal education. But if you have a training enterprise where people are trained and given certificates, then clearly it wouldn't be informal education. Then we'll be thinking of them as non-formal education. Dogbe Benjamin, applied linguistics and English education. The question is, how best can we distinguish between the informal? Oh, unfortunately, it got cut. So informal, I'm guessing you're asking between informal and formal. And we are saying the informal is loosely structured, it's not structured. Informal is unstructured. Non-formal is loosely structured. And then formal is strictly structured. So that is the distinguishing factor among the three. Please, what is the name of the scholar who said education was derived from the Latin word educere? Educere was Schofield. The name is Schofield. Schofield. It is Schofield who said education comes from the root word educere. Jonathan from ICT department says, back in JHS and SHS, we used to call one of them semi-formal education. Is it the same as non-formal in our lecture today, please? Okay, that's interesting. I think it will be the same. It's just a matter of terminology. So instead of saying non-formal, maybe you were taught it was semi-formal. That's exactly what we are talking about here. Francis Kwedu from ICT department ask if there are similarities and differences between education and training. If yes, what are some of them? Thank you very much. So to a large extent, training is a subset of education. Education develops the totality of the individual. Training only develops a part of the individual. So there could be skills training, there could be mental training. So long as it touches some aspect of the holistic individual, it is training. But for something to count as education, it must be holistic and it must involve understanding. A lot of times, some training does not involve understanding. So that is the difference. February from Counseling Psychology Department. My question is, can you say, oh, I'm sorry, February, your question was cut short, so I can't read it. Joseph Kwenu from ICT department. What is the difference between non-formal and informal education? I think we've overly explained this one. Non-formal is loosely structured. Informal is not structured. Fanuel from ICT department. You said formal education is rigid. What makes it to be rigid? What makes formal education rigid is the structures that we put in place. It's just like coming to UW. You have to register for courses. You have to attend classes. You have to write quizzes. If you miss out on any of these, you lose out. You can actually be cut off from the education. That is what makes it rigid. Please, I would like you to give the characteristics of non-formal education so we can get it well. So non-formal education is loosely structured. It is given to a group of people who have a particular need for a particular skill or knowledge, and once that is satisfied, the education is truncated. And so that is a simple one I can give you for now. My question is, what if a lecturer asks the class to meet at a certain place, not precisely in a classroom, maybe in his or her place for a topic they couldn't finish? Please, that one falls under what type of education? That's an interesting one. Yes, if the teacher wants to make an extension of the classroom, that is still part of formal education. It can even be a field trip. They might move the students from the school to another location just to teach them something. That is still part of formal education. What if a learner is willing to be educated but does not like the particular topic or subject being taught at a particular moment by the lecturer? That's a good question. I hope it's not me. And I know you like this one very much. Yes, so long as the learner has voluntarily submitted themselves to learn, whether or not they like the topic doesn't matter. It will still count as education. Also, in addition, I want to know the types of education group discussions, the types of education group discussion belongs to. This question is not very clear. I'm sorry about that. Niyang, Department of Management Sciences. How would one know that a statement or a sentence is midway definition? Oh, I think you are taking us way ahead. We didn't treat the types of definition today, so tune in next week and then you'll be talking about that. Osebo Nsuamira from French Department. Please, is learning about your tradition and culture, can it be classified as informal or non-formal? So if you're learning your tradition and culture in the informal setting outside of school, then it becomes informal education. But if you learn it as part of school, then it becomes formal education. Vera from our department. The question is, if we are asked to define education, is any of the definition given accepted? Yes. Any of the definition is accepted so long as it syncs with the essay that you're writing. Oh, there's so many questions. Okay. I don't know how much time we have. Okay. I'm being signaled to continue, so I'll keep doing it. Social Studies Department, Samuel says, can you classify education, which is incidental, as formal education? Incidental education will not be formal because it just happens by chance. It's not very structured. Eric Odro, Arts Department. If marriage is an institution, not education, is UW an institution or... Wow, this is interesting. Eric, UW is an institution of education. Marriage is an institution of marriage. UW is an institution of education. So that is the distinction. Peter Claver, ICT. The question is, okay, so the Muslim children, you brought it here. I think I've responded to that one already. Isaac Bupesi from French Education. There are some people in the system who have neither been to school nor attended classes, but can read and write even a second language. What type of education have such people undergone? Yes, they might have had some form of informal education to be able to read and write. Non-formal education is a combination of formal and informal education. Yes, to some extent, it takes one side, it takes some features from both sides, so that is accurate. Leonard from our department says the definition for non-formal education. Oh, you want a definition? I would rather want you to understand what it means rather than get a definition. We don't want you to just memorize. So once you understand it, it's good enough. King David from our department. I just want to know if education can be defined as the action or process of educating or being educated. Yes, certainly. We can define it as such. The process of being educated is education. Xavier from English department. Considering R.S. Peter's second criteria, can we rule out the fact that there is a certain degree of education in rote learning? Example, reciting a lion. A lion has a tail. Okay, yes, there's some degree to the extent that the recitation of a lion has a tail is connected to you knowing lions have a tail. That is education. So the focus is not on the recitation, but it's on you developing vocabulary. And so those things are there for a reason. And so that still counts as education. Daniel Bentel, Department of Applied Linguistics. What is the difference between education and curriculum? I will defer this question to next week when we come to talk about what curriculum is. But in simple terms, curriculum is the medium by which formal education is provided. Amira from French department is learning about your tradition and culture. Okay, I've responded to this one. Sylvia from English. Okay, I've responded to this one. Okay, Makafui. Doctor, thank you for detailed explanation you've given about education. Thank you very much, Makafui, for thanking me. Ali from Mathematics Department. Please, informal education, is it the oldest form of education? And why and who brought it? Yes, I would say it's the oldest form of education. It came before formal education. Zur Hilary, Mathematics Education. In an exam, can I describe as the total process of human learning where knowledge is imparted faculty training? Yes, that is Farhan's definition. Yes, you can use that. Nana Boatin Jr. says, good work. And Dombo Moses says, what are the basic types of education? Moses Domo, we mentioned that it's formal, informal, and non-formal. Thank you very much. I think there are some calls that I'll take. So, yes, is there a caller on the line? Hello, caller? Okay. Yes, so the number to call is 0332 320201. And then you can also call 050-392-3158. You can actually send text or WhatsApp on the second line, which is the 050. Hello, caller. Yes, your name and your department, please. Hello? Hello, speak up. I think your line.
Hello.
Okay, hello. Your name and your department.
Hello, good evening.
Good evening. Your name and department, please.
Please, I'm Coach Benjamin from Economics Department.
Okay, Benjamin from Economics. Do you have a question or contribution?
I would like to know the type of education given to students who are made to visit any media platform or even just up-to-date radio lectures.
Okay. So, other media platforms. Okay, what type of education is that one? Thank you very much. I will respond shortly. Hello, caller. Is another one on the line? Hello? Not yet. Okay. So, education provided through the media. It depends. The one I'm doing now is to supplement formal education, so it becomes formal. If a radio has a radio program, we can think of it at something else. But there's a caller. I'll take that one. Hello, caller.
Good evening.
Good evening. Your name and department, please.
My name is Wahab, calling from the Economics Department.
Okay, I didn't get your name. Can you say that again?
Please, can I know among the scholars, those who define education, which of them or which of the types, the definition of education is mostly appropriate? Is it the Farand or the Aga or the Scofield? Which of them is mostly
Thank you very much. I'll respond to your question shortly. Hello, caller.
Hello, it's Lukaya from the Linguistics Department.
Okay, Lukaya, you're back. Good.
Yes.
Yes.
I still want to give a contribution.
Sure, please go ahead.
Based on the example you gave about the mismatch, a colleague asked again whether education, when you learn something and later it's no more useful, does it still remain to be like education? I think I'll take it from another example, like being a child, you might not know how to eat. but then you start to learn eating.
Yeah.
And when you now know how to eat, okay,
yes,
the education is a noun, and now the whatever form that you are going to get is whether it's now past or whatever it is. But then if you say you are undergoing an education, maybe you are learning something, right? And so after that education has been achieved, you can say you are educated. So for them, you have learned how to eat.
yes.
And so that education that started by learning to eat has already been achieved. It doesn't mean it is not how to be educated.
Thank you very much, Lukaya. I think you've explained it way better than I did. Thank you so much for helping. Hello, caller.
Hello.
Hello, caller.
Yes,
Your name and department. Your name, please.
My name is Papa.
Roxanne.
Yes, please, go for it.
Okay.
Please, I want to know whether driving school for under formal education or informal.
Okay, driving school, formal or informal.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. I'll respond shortly. Hello, caller.
Yeah, hello, sir. Good evening.
Good evening. Your name and department.
My name is Okuri Jacob from Art Education Department.
Okay, Jacob from Arts Education. Yes.
Yeah, please. In the course of your lecture, you made mention NGO, and I wanted to declare that if NGO can be classified as an example of non-formal education.
Okay, I get your question. Thank you very much. I'll give a response shortly.
In the course of your lecture, you made mention
NGO. Hello.
Yes.
Yes. Hello. Your name and department.
Yes, good evening.
Good evening.
Yes, please, I want to ask a question.
Sure. What is your name and department, please?
Salif Mohammed, English department.
Okay, Mohammed from English. Yes. What is your question?
Please, hello.
Yes, we are listening.
Please, concerning the formal education, you said.
Have we lost you, Mohammed?
Okay, concerning the English, you said formal education.
Yeah.
You said there should be understanding, and you see those with Down syndrome. I'm sorry to say those with Down syndrome or like some illness.
Yes.
How do you characterize those people as?
Okay. Persons with special education needs, you mean? Okay, good. Thank you very much. Good. I will respond to your question shortly, Mohammed. Hello, is somebody on the line? Yes.
Yeah.
Your name and department, please.
Yeah, I'm called from Linguistics and Education.
Linguistics education. Your name, please.
Yeah, I'm Ofori. Ofori Robert.
Okay, Ofori. Yes.
Okay, sir. So all the things you may ask that the education ends.
Ofori, please reposition yourself. We're having a hard time hearing you.
Please, said.
Reposition yourself and okay, keep talking and let's see if the signal is better.
Okay.
Okay, Ofori. Okay. Hello, caller. Yes, your name and department.
Good evening, sir.
Yes, good evening.
Thank you for this opportunity. My name is Tania Apanga Bernard, English Department.
English Department.
Yes, please.
Okay.
Based on your explanation, the three parts of education, informal education is where an individual learns attitudes, values to be fit in a society, and that is for life.
Yeah.
In this perspective, can we say formal and non-formal education has ended as soon as the individual acquires the certificate? Thank you very much.
Okay, when you acquire the certificate, does it end? Okay. Good. Thank you very much. Hello, caller.
Hello.
Yes.
Hello.
Your name and your department?
Yes, my name is Zulu Abdul Somed.
Samuel. Okay. Your department?
From Linguistics Department.
Okay, linguistics. Good. You're also doing very well. Yes. Question or contribution?
Police, I want to know the groups that we form by ourselves for the purpose of studies.
Studying, okay.
Where can we classify it to be? Whether
Okay.
formal or informal or non-formal?
Thank you very much. That is a very good question. Yes. Good. Another caller. Hello, caller.
Good evening.
Good evening. Your question, your name and department.
My name is Blessing.
Blessing.
From the Economics Department.
Okay, Blessing from Economics Department.
My question is that politicians go on public campaigns before to sensitize the populace before election. So I want to know if that form of education is formal or non-formal education.
Okay, so political campaigning. Good. Thank you very much. I get your question. Keep listening. Yes. Okay. Are we taking a break now and responding? Thank you very much. Good. So let me begin to answer some of the questions. Ben was asking the type of education we give through the media. Is it formal or informal or non-formal? And I was trying to explain that what we are doing here is part of the formal education. So we will need more information about the type of education being provided by the media. Of course, if it's like these talk shows where people go and discuss problems like marital problems and all of that, we can form it as an informal education or non-formal education depending on the features of that particular program. But I can't see how a media form of education will be a formal education because it's not rigidly structured. Driving school. Somebody asked whether driving school, what type does it fall under? I think we mentioned that earlier. Driving school forms under non-formal education. Oklu asks about NGOs, what the NGOs do. And we said, I was not looking at NGOs generally and their activities, but I was just giving the example that sometimes they organize training and programs to equip some particular people with some form of skills. So if they are doing that, then we classify that activity of the NGO as non-formal education. Mohammed wanted to know whether the criteria about education involving knowledge and understanding also applies to persons with special education needs. And I'll say yes, persons with special education needs also, it goes to them as well. Persons with special education needs are also able to study the same way we are able to study. They just might need some form of support to be able to get to our level. And so they also get formal education. The other question was, if people get their certificate at the end of their formal education and non-formal education, does it mean it has come to an end? Yes. Once you finish and you get your certificate, it means it has come to an end, unless you enroll in another formal or non-formal education. The other interesting question was about group studies. If a group of students meet and then decide they are having group studies outside of the formal classroom environment, where would we classify that? That's a very interesting question. And I want to make a distinction here. There is the element of tutorials, where a group of students needing help in a particular concept will organize themselves, get an expert to give them some tutorials. If that happens, it falls under non-formal education. But there are instances where lecturers might also give a group an assignment to work on and present in class. In that sense, that is still part of the formal education. And so we'll need more information to be able to categorize whether it is formal or informal. Blessing is asking what the politicians do when they mount the pulpit and begin the podium and begin to call attention to their political parties. What type of education will that be? I will need more information to be definite about this one, but for a lot of the times, what we see there is actually not education, because they are just campaigning. They just want to get people's attention. And so they don't really go there to educate. They just go and shout slogans, sing songs, chant to whip enthusiasm. They hardly usually educate. And so I wouldn't even consider campaigning as education at all. Good questions and contributions. I'm very excited by your participation today. It has been a very wonderful, wonderful presentation. And I want to thank my team here at Radio WINNEBA. They've been phenomenal. They've granted us 35 extra minutes. And you know, it costs so much radio time to stay. And it's because you have participated actively. And I'm very excited by your participation. And so I think it's about time to sign up. Or okay, so I've been given 10 minutes more, and so if you want to catch the late bird, you can still come in with your question or contribution. It's somebody on the line already. Let me see. Okay, messages. Okay, so let me check on the messages and then try to respond to them for the next 10 minutes, and then we can wrap up. But thanks to you for all these people who called in. I think we got more than 30 people calling in or sending a message, which is very impressive. And I want to encourage you to keep listening to Radio WINNEBA. We have a lot of wonderful programs for you, and for Radio Lecture, you don't want to miss it. Every Tuesday, same time, we'll be coming your way with this course. So make sure you tune in and then listen. So let me take a couple of messages that came. Are these WhatsApp messages or Facebook or WhatsApp messages? Okay, WhatsApp and text messages. I'll take them and then we can wrap up. Idris Musa says, during festival celebration, people acquire certain knowledge whenever they visit there. So is that also education? If yes, what type of education? Yes, that would be a form of informal education. If a parent assists or a ward to do homework or assignment, what type of education has the parents provided then? That is interesting. If they are assisting in a homework, that homework is part of formal education. And so the parent is just supporting formal education. Mukaila from Art Department. Can you define education as a process of obtaining knowledge through observation and experimentation? Yes, you can define it as such. Lily K. Some stories are told to impart knowledge. Please say, is that part of education? I would say yes. It's a medium. So education is delivered through varied means. Sometimes it can be storytelling. So yes, it is just a strategy that is used to deliver education. And so that in itself counts as education. Is that all? I'm guessing. Okay, so that is what I have here for the text messages. If you still want to catch the late bird, 5 more minutes, you can give us a call on the numbers 0332 320201 or 050 392 3158, and then I can quickly respond as we try to wrap up our discussion for this evening. We have talked about for education, what it means. We've dug into the roots of the term education, and we've come to appreciate that there are varied definitions of education, but they all coalesce around the holistic development of the individual in the acquisition of knowledge, skills, and attitude. We have been trying to make a distinction among formal and informal and non-formal education, and I hear there's a caller online. Hello, caller.
Hello?
Yes, sir. Your name and your department.
This is Amkosi Bangaman from Economics Department.
Okay, Economics Department. Do you have a question or contribution?
My question is, when citizens or the public are being educated on how they are voted by the issue, how do you classify this type of education?
Can you say that again? I was missing a couple of your words because the network was not straight. Yes.
Well, I said when the EC educates its citizens or the public about how they can cast their vote.
Vote, okay.
I wanted to know where it falls under normal, informal, and non-formal.
Okay. Thank you very much. Electoral Commission. Good. Thank you very much. Yes. Is there another caller on the line? Hello, caller.
Hello. Good morning.
Good morning. Good evening. Yes, you got us on that one. Your name and your department. Hello, your name and department, please. Hello, caller. I think we lost him.
Satisfied.
Uh-oh, I think your line is disturbed. Your line is not straight. So reposition yourself. Reposition yourself and then try talking and let's see if it works. Hello? Uh-oh, sorry. Try to call back. Hopefully you might be able to catch us. Good. Is there somebody else on the line? Not yet. Okay. Good. So let me take this submission that came about Electoral Commission and what they try to do. So let's make a distinction between sensitization and then education. So sometimes they just sensitize us. If it's sensitization and getting us to go and vote, that is not really education. But if it's about providing you with a skill of knowing how to train, that will be a form of non-formal education because it's given to voters who qualify to vote. Thank you very much. Hello, a caller on the line.
Good evening, sir.
Good evening. Your name and your department?
I'm Upon from the art department.
Upon, okay, from art department, yes.
Yes, I want to ask you said earlier that political campaign is not a form of education.
Yeah.
And I want to ask whether the pastor ministering to his or her church members
is education.
Is that true?
Oh, thank you very much, Opon. That's a very interesting question. Yes, I'll respond to that shortly. Good. I think we might take one more, the very last one. So if you're calling, try and meet the mark. One last call and then we can wrap up. Hello, caller.
Hello.
Congratulations,
Good
you made
evening,
it.
This is Peter back.
Peter, which department?
Yeah, I've come back from ICT department.
Oh, okay, ICT. Good. So what's your question?
Footballers and their coaches. What kind of education do they go through?
Okay, coaches. What kind of education do they give to footballers? That's a very good question. Too. Thank you very much. Thank you, Peter. Good. So I will take the Electoral Commission one, and I was explaining that if Electoral Commission is doing sensitization, that wouldn't count as education. But if they offer some training on how to vote, we will consider that as non-formal education because they are giving a specialized education to voters who form a subgroup of the population. The question about what a pastor is ministering to the congregation, what type of education is that? We want to know more about this ministering. If the pastor is exorcising and casting out demons, I don't think it's education. If the pastor talks to the pulpit and say, I'm going to teach you about A, B, C, D, then it's more purposeful, and we might consider that as informal education. Football coach and they are footballers, yes. So we will also need to define this one. If you go elsewhere, there are soccer academies that specialize in training footballers. And in those academies, they have a structure and they have times where they go for classes and all of that. So if that is what we are talking about, that will be formal education. But if you are talking about the coaches we have around here who are part-time, and we have part-time footballers who meet occasionally and the coach gives them some tactics, we will say it is loosely structured. So we will say that is non-formal education. So it depends on the information that we have about this type of football coach and the footballers we are talking about. So thank you very much, listeners and viewers. It has been a very interesting radio lecture, and your participation made it so interesting. We are very happy that you were able to join us for this very first lecture of the course EDC111, School Curriculum, Social Change and National Development. Sincere thanks to all of you who were able to call. I know a lot more of you were not able to get through to the line, but one way or the other you participated by listening, and your questions might have been asked by some of your colleagues, and so we are all better at learning the concept of education because we're all part of it. Thank you so much for being part of it, and appreciation going out to the team at Radio WINNEBA. They have been fantastic today, supporting me in a lot of ways. You were not seeing them, but they were doing a lot of the hard work, and I was only doing the talking. So thank you very much, the team over there, for supporting. And I want to urge all of you to continue to listen to Radio Lecture. Tomorrow morning there will be another lecture. Tune in and listen. And if you want to listen to Radio Lecture for this course, then make it a point to be part every Tuesday at 6 p.m. Myself or my colleagues will be here to take a topic or two on the school curriculum, social change, and national development. Tomorrow morning, the lecture is for EDCR 232, Principles and Practice of Teaching. And we are going to have Dr. Daniel Buku coming in to talk about the principles of effective teaching. So all level 200 students doing P&P. Tomorrow morning is your time. Tune in at 6:30 a.m. Radio WINNEBA, and then listen to Radio Lecture for P&P. It is a very interesting topic, and so even if you are not offering the course, I think it will be a good program to tune in and listen. On behalf of the Department of Educational Foundations that supports this program, I want to thank you and say tune in and keep listening to Radio WINNEBA, because we have a lot more in store for you. Thank you very much and have a good evening.